Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety and Health webcast, Beyond the Buzzwords, Finding the Right EHS Software for Your Digital Transformation Journey, sponsored by Cority. This is Alan Ferguson, Associate Editor at Safety and Health Magazine, and I am moderating today's session. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to start the presentation in a couple of minutes, but first I want to go over some preliminary items. The views of today's speaker and organization are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health Magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not mean the Council or magazine endorses those items. At the end of today's webcast, we will conduct a question and answer session. To ask a question, simply type it in the text box on the lower side of your screen, the left side of your screen, and click the button for Submit Question. Feel free to ask your question at any time during the presentation. You don't have to wait for the Q&A to begin. Now, we'll try to answer as many questions as possible, but we might not get to every question. Any unanswered questions will be forwarded to today's speakers. At the end of the webcast, you'll be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey, and I will let you know more about that after the presentation. This webcast is archived, so you can access it after today's live event. To view this webcast and all of our past webcasts, go to safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. The presentation also features a resource list of helpful information below the Q&A box. And finally, if you need basic troubleshooting information, click the Help button located on your screen. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Our speakers today are Pam Bobbitt and Will Reed from Cority. Pam Bobbitt has worked with prominent environmental, health, and safety software vendors for more than a decade. She was previously an EHS professional for more than 15 years in the pharmaceutical, chemical, and automotive industries, and began her career as a field chemist specializing in hazardous waste management. Will Reed has provided advisory services, environmental health, safety and quality information management for more than 22 years with some of the leading software providers around the world. In his current role, he assists with corporate sustainability initiatives and EHSQ data management, along with designing solutions that incorporate evergreen regulatory content and audit processes. Pam and Will, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Alan. All right, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to take you through a little bit of a journey. We're going to talk about digital transformation first. What is it? We hear it, I don't know about you, but see it about 5 times a day, whether it's, looking at articles or through emails, hearing it on the news. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to play a little buzzword bingo, kind of helping you define and understand not only what these buzzwords are, but how they affect you and what you should know about those buzzwords. Then we're going to talk about requirements. Like as you're doing a digital transformation journey, to really understanding what it is that you want to accomplish with your technology. And then lastly, we always like to talk about some best practices and use cases. So we'll share a couple of those as well to help you understand some of the initiatives that your colleagues in the industry have been undertaking and the success that they've had. So let's start our journey. Digital transformation, again, hear it all the time. What is it? Different people have different terminologies for it. It's top of mind. Right now, if you want to know how you get the attention of the C-suite, say digital transformation, and you will have their ear. And the reason is that it's really this ongoing with all the technology changes that are happening. It's the integration of technology into the areas of business, right? Fundamentally changing how you operate and deliver value to your customers internally and externally. So as you're doing that, of course, everybody knows as you're introducing technology, it's also affecting that cultural change within the organization, right? Changing the status quo. And you really need to be able, with technology today, experiment, try things out and not be afraid to fail. Understanding, what type of technology to bring into your organizations to drive that value. Why is it on top of the CIO's mind and the C-suite's mind? they're investing in this, again, to perform better and to make the demands of their stakeholders. It's projected in 2022 that companies are going to spend nearly $2 trillion on this digital transformation journey, investing in technology to support their operations and improve their operations. So it's really time, a great time for EHS, who's always been a little bit lagging in adopting technology into their programs for one reason or the other, mainly sometimes because it's always been harder for us to get that budget, but it's time for us to take advantage of this and jump on that digital transformation bandwagon with the buzzword. What are the benefits of digital transformation? So some of these, it's standardizing processes. Right? Technology can help us have standardized processes. What does that value bring to companies? It's really around, streamlining. If you have initiatives called workflow efficiencies, it's really helping streamline those processes so you get better information, better data, getting visualization to identify those risks, right? Easier reporting. How many times, have you manipulated those wonderful spreadsheets and had, the corrupted Excel going on and trying to correlate that data and all of that administrative hassle that you have to go through to collect all of the different pieces from different systems and bringing that together. And, of course, that's going to help you communicate more effectively within your different departments and break down those silos. I know Will has been working on this for a couple of years and seen a lot. So, Will, why don't you kind of tell a couple of stories around these benefits of digital transformation?
Absolutely, Pam. Thanks so much. In my most recent, professional world in consulting, we saw digital transformation not only for our customers, but also internally. And digital transformation, for many industries, doesn't necessarily mean going from clipboard to spreadsheet. It may be going from fairly complex spreadsheets to more centralized and, available technology throughout the workforce. So, for instance, from auditing, being able to use consistent auditing handbooks, but doing it on mobile devices, right? And so that when you wanted to push updates to your auditing team, you could do that simultaneously and have them, be available to the entire group and those results be able to come back, right away in that new format. So, I think digital transformation, it doesn't necessarily have to be, going from primitive to using, an electronic device. It can be, we already use some electronic capability, but we're just not as organized as we want to be. And we want to share data. We want to harmonize processes a little bit to do things more efficiently. And we want to be able to trend and track across the organization so that we can really pull some meaningful data, for not only sustainability reporting, but for instance, if we're, submitting information for, incident rates to ensure that our insurance rates are as low as they can be to our industry peers. So there's lots of great, benefits and lots of, improvement capabilities with digital transformation processes.
Yeah, and of course, as we talk about digital and all of these different technologies out there, we run into a plethora of buzzwords. Here are just a few that we see, and there's a lot of confusion that goes around. I've got two different sets of lists here. Of course, we can't go through all of these buzzwords, but wanted to focus in on a lot of them that really impact and how they impact you as we discussed in the agenda. So, cloud, SaaS, artificial intelligence, platform as a service, data lakes, data warehouses, metadata, actionable insights, machine learning. There's all of these different buzzwords that we hear, and of course, when I came over into technology about a decade ago, I didn't know what SaaS was and what that meant, and so it's really great for us to really understand, and everybody interchanges these, so there's a lot of confusion. So let's talk about a few of them, and before we go into that, just kind of want to, kind of level set. So all of those different buzzwords, here's our first poll question of the day, right? How familiar are you with these buzzwords? So just select which one, right? I've, kind of familiar with less than 25% of them, greater than 75%, just to kind of understand. Familiar is, you've heard it, maybe not know the definition, but you've definitely, run into these. So I'll just give everybody just a couple of seconds here to chime in there on how familiar you are with the buzzwords, and let's see. All right, so about, almost 41% of the attendees today, about 25 to 50%. So great, hopefully we'll help you as we go through these, kind of have a better understanding of those buzzwords going on. So let's take a look at the first one. All right, SaaS and cloud, right? We hear these interchangeably, and they don't mean the same thing, right? Cloud computing and SaaS are different, but they're closely related terms of the same idea. So we'll go into this. First we'll define cloud computing, and so cloud is cloud-based software. It's rather mainstream. It's based on applications that are hosted in other areas, like in a hosting facility, where SaaS is really, again, that technology difference on the back end, right? So that the way that the technology and the database behind that is structured. So it's really important, right, to understand that difference. So in short, cloud computing is a network of remote servers and hosted systems, right? So just taking your own homegrown systems, if you're using a homegrown system, and put it in another facility, right? That's hosted. But on a SaaS service, and I know we'll come in and bring a little bit more to this, but the SaaS services, from the technology behind it, right, you have a structure in that database that allows you to update information, capture information in such a way that you aren't making any disruptions to the database.
So Pam, just taking this a little bit further, let's talk just a little about how we interact with these systems. So, for most of the users of EHS and quality systems, it's relatively unknown, and there's really no difference to an end user. Is this a cloud system, or is this a software as a service, or SaaS? Where you're really going to find the difference here is from an administration and a cost perspective. So a total cost of ownership and how you incur those costs within your business, from a, capital versus kind of a yearly maintenance type of budget. So, what we've seen with industry is that traditionally the way that applications have transitioned is, 20 years ago, most of the systems were installed locally. There were client server type versions of software where there was a central database installation, and each PC would be tethered to that main one. in the advent of advanced technology, that went from essentially browser-based, but it was still behind the firewall of that company. And so the next step was going to cloud, which essentially took that server behind your firewall or inside your company walls, and it put it into an external hosting center. So it put it somewhere else where it was perhaps in a more secure, safe, and guaranteed environment. So for instance, many clients who are, had, needs for constant uptime or things where they needed to guarantee several internet service providers simultaneously in the event of outages, they would go to great companies like SunGuard or, other data hosting centers that would say, hey, we have secure site and we can allow constant uptime. Going to SaaS, that changes the game even a bit more, where you're saying it's not just your application hosted on someone else's server. We're now talking about everyone within that application essentially sharing the same code base. Your information is still stored separately. However, the entire group benefits from that changing code base and improvements. And so companies like Cority and like other SaaS-based companies, Salesforce being one, eBay, all of these other platform services, they can make upgrades where that is seamless to the end user. At Cority, we have what we call a do no harm policy, where we can make upgrades, but it's optional for our users to implement some of those new things if they feel that they're not quite ready from a business perspective. But from a cost perspective, it really, really drives the cost down and into, more of an operational and OpEx expense to where it's easier to manage over time. So, when we talk about the cloud versus SaaS, it really kind of pushes that maintenance burden back to that software provider that specializes in the area so that you as a user do not have to worry about that. I'm sorry, Pam, if you're transitioning there, if we can get your audio back on.
Thank you so much. I am chatting to myself on mute. Sorry about that. So as we transition, we're going to talk about customization and configuration in a little bit, but we're transitioning to now on apps. And those of you like me, I think of as an app as something that is on my mobile device, right? Those favicons, those icons that you see floating around there that are typically on our mobile devices. But really, an app is anything that's just the modern term for a software application. So an app can be something that you are accessing via your laptop. But again, most of them think about that an app as being on that mobile device. And there's a lot of things that are great about that and the way that technology is moving forward and how we address those. So apps are more than just those that are on your mobile, but again, we talk about mobility mostly when most people think about apps, as I do. And then, of course, there are things such as what's called the native app. So depending on which mobile device that you have, you download those, and there's also the ones that are called the responsive apps, which really give you a better security on accessing that information via the browser on whichever mobile device that you're using.
So let's talk a little bit about the applicability of mobile technology and applications. And when I think of this, I go back to where I started my career, which is in, power generation and the energy business. And, we started with, I'll say, technology the most when it came to, calculating air emissions, doing continuous emissions monitors and trying to consolidate data, back for reporting purposes. And so amazingly, the mobile side of technology has been around for close to 20 years. 20 years ago, however, that was being able to take a laptop into a production type facility and wondering, okay, do we need to be, in a certain area? Do we need an intrinsically safe device? How do we need to operate from a tech standpoint? That has now switched significantly with our app world, and in the advent of smartphones has just accelerated that capability immensely. So even though the mobile side of technology has been there and has been available in the EHS and in the quality world, it's been slow to implement. However, in the last 5 years, it's probably been the greatest turning point of the EHS software world, and people want to do as much as possible on mobile devices because they tend to do other things in their lives on mobile devices, and they expect that the EHS world should be able to operate as efficiently and simply as every other app that they can access, from online banking to buying airline tickets to doing whatever you want to do. If I can get in, do what I need to do, and exit, get on with my day, then that's a good thing. So we're seeing a lot of companies go to a mobile-first type of approach, meaning that Cority, like other companies, is really focusing on where are most of the users going to interface with the data and with the system, and that's through a mobile technology. Doesn't have to be from a phone. It can be from a tablet. It can be from a laptop, or it can be from even a desktop. But it can have the simplicity of an app when we talk about specializing or tailoring that user experience. So again, the same principles apply to how we want to get to this data. We want it accessible, we want it visible, but we want to still guarantee the quality. So we want to make sure that user experience is simple, yet is complete enough to allow the workers to do what they need to do. Pam?
And we're going to get into that importance of data quality, and because that's the beauty of that mobility and the apps, because you are getting it straight from the source. So instead of entering data on a spreadsheet out in the field, or capturing notes in a notebook and then having to come back, just thinking of auditors, right? They would make notes and collect information, and then at the end of the day, after exhausted from 8 hours of getting information, you're having to re-key that in to some type of system, and so you're losing maybe some of the thoughts that you're doing. So a lot of things with that mobility and the data quality, which leads us into some of the next buzzwords around data warehouse and data lake. I use this because I think it's really straightforward on explaining the difference, right? So a data warehouse, you've got structured data coming into a system. I'm going to date myself. Back when I started my career, right, the rage was access databases, which were really great and structured for getting information in. Not so great to get information out. But kind of think of that structured input, can be large data volumes, but it's not agile, right? It's fixed and you're putting information in. and you could get structured like reporting and data out. Now with data lakes, right, you're dumping a lot of information, structured, unstructured, all kinds of information in, and it's a really high agility to configure and reconfigure. So a really great way of making sense of all of this data with those algorithms and data scientists putting together to try to make sense of all this information that you're throwing in. So it doesn't have to go in and all the same way like we would. Again, I think, or Excel, spreadsheets. Think about that as kind of a data warehouse. Data is all going in very structured, where a data lake, you're having all of lots of different information coming from different sources, and then using, algorithms and have to do data scientists to kind of make sense of all of that information.
So let's look at a practical application of data lake versus data warehouse. And I know that if we have some IT folks, joining us today, this is probably a more familiar concept. But, the structure of a data warehouse, again, has been, technology that has existed and probably exists in many of the systems that you use today, meaning that a warehouse has something that you know where to find it. It's cataloged. You know what row, what column to go get it. And we can have those relationships so that you know where to find things fairly easily and you know how things interrelate. When we talk about data lakes, we now are getting into an area to say, look, let's mix it all together and let's take a look perhaps at some relationships that we didn't know exist before. And when we look at the capability of data lake versus data warehouse, is that we can now get into some really interesting concepts around, gaming theory and some of the more what we would consider high tech or more leading edge technology companies have done, which is let's look at how the human interface works with some of the day-to-day. And so we look at, for instance, data lakes around incident rates or incident management, meaning can we put a bunch of things together and look for correlations that we might not have been able to find otherwise. So we can look at some structured data, for instance, of things that we collect from our facility or from the field, but then we can import all kinds of other data from other sources, meteorological data or certain other events that were occurring at the time, and to say, do these types of influences have an effect on our incident rates? Can even be the amount of daylight or sunlight, times of sunrise, sunset, right? Do they have impacts on how light enters our facility and how workers can have either enough light to do work or not have enough light? Or what are some other things on temperature and other sensor data? So we're seeing a lot of applications of data lake to where we need to be able to help make decisions if the data helps us or if it really is kind of inconsequential. So when we look at data lake concepts, it really opens the door to so many possibilities. And again, we come back to data quality of, with that lake process that we can come in and say, what does the data tell us about the results that we're getting? And do we need to change process or do we need to change how we collect data to get more meaningful insights? Pam?
Thanks, Will. And it really leads us right into our next topic on our buzzword terminology around business intelligence and data analytics. A lot of people interchange these terminologies. Right, business intelligence is really kind of the reporting that we've really been doing. And data analytics takes that information you just discussed about all these different elements and looking at how that can impact, right? We hear a lot of things about predictive and prescriptive analytics. And it's really important for people to understand, one, right, to get that information, how it's coming in, And the fact that if you're putting that into that data lake for that data analytics, that true predictive and prescriptive, the importance of the data quality in there. Because, of course, the algorithms, they learn and they get better, but the better your data quality, right, the standard way of putting in information, the completeness of the information is really going to affect that result, right? So taking that from a prediction, a lot of people think about, right, okay, so if I have all this information coming in, say from, equipment data and, my inspection reports that are structured, but I'm getting some more kind of unstructured data from equipment, and I want to analyze what is the prediction of, that piece of equipment shutting down, or, that can affect, an employee, and potentially have an incident around that piece of equipment, the data quality being good from all of those different systems will help increase that prediction. And then people are saying now, right, that they want these, analytics. Oh, well, you can just tell me what I need to do. Well, they can only tell you these algorithms. Of course, they're learning better from that data, but the better your data, the better that they can explain to you some of the things or make suggestions of what you should be able to do.
So let's again look at some practical applications of business intelligence and analytics. And what I really want to focus on here is actionable insights. So we had a situation recently where we're working with a client in the food and beverage industry. So this was a processing plant, and we're looking at incident rates and root cause. And as part of root cause, we always look at employee training. There's a lot of seasonal work and temporary work that was coming in, and the client was trying to understand, are we giving the appropriate training for the job function or for the job role that was there? And so this particular client was able to, on the badge, the ID badge of their workers, to look at, from an RFID perspective, where in the facility were they? Okay, so were they at their station or were they in various other areas? Just to make sure, for instance, that, the training that they were receiving was appropriate for the station where they were working. What some of the data actually showed was that the training was appropriate for the job function. However, that particular group of employees spent much more time in other areas where they did not have safety training, right? Where there were some chemical hazards, there were some machinery hazards that those workers may not be aware. And the workers, to their credit, were trying to do the right thing and help their coworkers. However, they didn't realize that they didn't have the appropriate training in those areas where they were going. Okay, so what we're able to see from the analytics of this, was that the training, in fact, was correct for the job. However, the employees were not where they thought that they were supposed to be. Okay, and so when we look at again, quality of data and insights, we're able to make the determination, okay, there's a couple things. One, those training programs can now be expanded to say, if you do need to go over this area and help out, there are certain things that you absolutely need to know, because we do not want to have, any adverse things happening, not just for the company, but obviously for the workers and getting everyone home safely. But on the other side, just saying, look, are there physical things, and are there training things, and are there educational things that we need to do to really improve? And so having access to that data and being able to really drive improvement, the client was able to see an immediate impact, not just an incident rate, but actually from a culture standpoint of the employees feeling that the company was taking care of them. And that they had their best interest in mind, which, was correct. But, the data was able to prove that. And so when we look at that intelligence and that analytics, we really want to, drive actions that improve for all. Pam?
All right, let's go into my favorite that everyone mixes up. Customization versus configuration. Again, this is one of my passion projects to help educate everybody. So I have a bicycle jacket, a cycling jacket here. And it's really great because it kind of shows that difference. It's configurable, right? So if you look at that jacket, you can have it both long sleeves. You can put, zip off and have a short sleeve and a long sleeve, and it doesn't matter. Or you can zip off both sleeves and just have it sleeveless depending on the weather as you're cycling. And this is a great example of a configuration. I don't need to be a seamstress to change my jacket. I can simply use the tools. I know how to operate a zipper and zip it up, and I'm good to go. I don't have to send it back to the manufacturer and say, hey, could you make these changes for me? I'm right-handed, and so my right arm doesn't get as cool as my left arm just because it's more active when I'm braking or whatever that reason. I don't have to ship it back to the manufacturer for them to do it for me. So think about that and apply that to technology. So technology and configuration, I'm able, as not even a tech professional, an IT, guru, I can make changes myself easily, know how to operate, basic operating systems, so I can easily add to pick list. I know those typical icons where I can do that. I can easily say, oh, you know what, I want to capture some additional comments here, and so I want to add a field. I can do that on my own without changing any structure of the system or, as Will mentioned earlier, doing any harm to any future releases and updates to the system. So think about that instead of customization, which is, remember I talked about having to send it back to the manufacturer to make those changes to my jacket. Well, customization, you would have to only request that from the technology vendor to make those changes on your behalf. That's a customization. It's a change in the code, which makes it difficult, of course, when you're doing releases, that what you do with that custom code, and of course the cost, not only that they will charge you, because I'm sure that if I want to make any adjustments to my jacket, I'm going to get charged for that. So you would get charged for that, plus you have to maintain that customization as you go through any releases, because it is custom code to that system. So I think this is a really great way. Think about it. Anything that you can do, right, on a technology system, that is a configuration. And there's lots of examples out there of what you can do now. And it's not going to change anything versus a customization where you are actually changing code to the system through a specialist, where it's making it difficulties when you're doing those upgrades and releases, right? So think about your phones, right? You have releases all the time, no matter which device that you have, right? The latest release of that operating system is available, right? You can do that update, and it doesn't change any of your icons, the way that you've, put them together or organized them. That is configuration. You've configured your mobile device, and when there's a latest update to that operating system for that device, it doesn't change anything that you've done. It doesn't affect it. It doesn't break it.
So let's again look at some examples of why customization or why configuration. Going back again to early years of systems to help manage did a lot of work with some specialty chemical companies that had tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 chemicals, right? Be it intermediates or compounds that they were working with. And many of those companies would take off-the-shelf software programs and customize them a bit, because the software then was able to essentially be a repository of their intellectual property. It was able to essentially be the center of their differentiation in the market and really hold the keys to how they were successful. Fast forward that a little bit, in that companies then have migrated to say, we know that there are a lot of leading companies that have spent a lot of money on process improvement and on management systems and programs to really to do things efficiently. We want to benefit from that, and we want to benefit from the amount that they've put into technology and working with software companies to kind of make that into their core. But we're really not that complicated, and we want to be able to maybe have a bit more simplified version of that to be able to scale to our organization. So, we've done a lot of work to say, the software can be configured, meaning that, we can now, do some things with the software to make them, optional. Fields can be hidden, things can be much less hard-coded as they were many years ago. Technology has driven this immensely, having everything web-based and applying some business rules to things. But that, small to mid-sized companies can now take advantage of, complete functionality of an incident management or a quality management system, but they may not have all the components that some of the larger industry players do, but they want to take benefit of that. And so when we talk about customization and difficulty going forward is, the great thing about customization is that you have it exactly the way you want to. The downside of that, though, is that you have to reapply those customizations every time there is a software release. And, software releases used to be 12 to 18 months. So maybe that was a cost that they can incur. Software releases now are typically, for software as a service providers such as Cority, those are 3 times per year. And so the amount of burden on the IT organization and even on the business to come back and say, we need you to verify that everything works like it should, to go through that process 3 times a year, then becomes a lot of burden and a lot of frustration on the business that they spend more time in a QA mode than they actually do, kind of in a day-to-day operations mode. So, Cority has really moved to, the configuration model, which is, our customers do not customize because the platform is changeable. It's flexible enough to allow you to do what you need to do, without having to get into that code base. Now, the important concept to this is we still can allow, and SaaS companies can still allow for integrations with other systems. So if you have an interface that allows, then, for instance, integration with HR or maintenance management or production or other systems that you have, yes, we can absolutely bring that type of data in, but that's not a customization. The systems can communicate and allow to exchange information without having to get to that code base and make fairly complex changes. Pam?
All right, we've gone through, and hopefully that's giving you some insights and clarification on terms and kind of that business applicability to those. And now let's kind of get to requirements. If you're Harry Potter fans, hopefully you recognize this is the room of requirement. And I thought this was kind of nice because, again, coming off of that, configuration element and technology and all the different choices that are out there and new technology coming up, it's really important for you to understand what actually are your requirements. And we'll go through this We've got kind of a general list, but, you know, some of the things that I think about as we start into this is the fact that I know a lot of people say, well, you know, the system, I must have email notifications, right? I want email notifications anytime this has changed. I want to be alerted, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, do you really want email notifications? Because, you know, how many emails do you get a day? And of course, most systems have email notifications, but you know, do you really want that influx to your already probably busy inbox? And what is really your requirement? It's that alerting. So what are the ways, the most effective way into your business process? Because if you already are getting multiple different emails a day, and then you're going to be have this influx of emails coming in, you're going to get, you know, kind of bored of them, and I guarantee you'll put them in and they automatically go into a folder and you won't look at them, which like defeats the purpose of what actually probably your requirement was. So, Will, why don't you walk us through a couple of different of those scenarios?
Certainly. So, you know, I think that, you know, the requirements of you know, as we work with our consulting partners, and, you know, we have a lot of customers who have a really good idea of the way they want to do things. But when we work with our consulting partner teams who have lived this for many, many years and bring a lot of good industry expertise, you know, we can kind of help sort through some of the, you know, I'll say the difference of the need to have versus want to have, and those types of things. And as we get through requirements, you know, many times, you know, we've worked with our customers to say, you know, hey, we really want to get email notifications that can do this, or we really want to, you know, we want all these folks to be notified. As we actually get through the requirements and then kind of talk through, okay, let's talk about the change to your organization and how, you know, doing something in a system or in a newer system, how that can help you. And what we found is that often the, you know, the need to have changes a bit, or sometimes goes down to a, you know what, maybe we just don't really need that after all, because we're talking about operating our business in a bit more efficient way. Okay, so, you know, what we really want to do with requirements is have an associated value with that. So, you know, Cority in our, for instance, management of change capability, you know, we want to show those who are, you know, approving processes or submitting processes for change can see exactly where that is within the system, but they don't need to be, you know, flooded with emails as to every time that goes through the system, right? So there are dashboards and portals and things that can give a lot more meaningful information around those requirements, and allowing them to make decisions efficiently. Okay, and that's really what we're after here from the requirements, is just to understand what is your business driver, like what are you really trying to accomplish, and let's take a look at how we can do that most efficiently. You know, I think part of the requirements review, and again, our consulting partners really help with this, is, you know, understanding what has gone well and what has not gone well, you know, in implementing these systems before, so that expertise can be shared, and you don't have to repeat mistakes of those that have come before you and decided that, hey, maybe that wasn't the best way to do things. Okay?
Yeah, and I think to that last point, one of the things that we see a lot of times as you're doing, you know, this digital transformation journey and using, you know, the newer technology and changing to newer technology, is to not, you know, recreate. That's a bottom line one, not recreating what you currently have, right? And understanding, you know, really, as you mentioned, sort of, I call it the pain that you're trying to solve, and how that technology. So that goes a little bit to your maturity too, in the fact of, yes, it may be a little bit uncomfortable because it's new and it's different and it doesn't look like your old system, but that's not a bad thing. So as we're talking about, you know, all of this technology and we're talking about buzzwords, and we always know that there's obstacles, right, to implementing new technology, whether it's, the change management. Now we've told you sometimes it's budget, but, there's a lot of investment going on with digital transformation, so I don't think that's going to be too much of an obstacle. But let's get a feel of what obstacles that you are facing, because, again, right now with technology, it's bringing all the different departments together. So is it, what's your barrier? We always talk about barriers and risk and controls and EHS. Is it siloed departments and lack of that collaboration, that everybody agrees that they're going to use the same technology, or that how to use the technology? Is it budget still? Is it fear because there's so many choices out there that you're going to pick the wrong technology? Or is it just the fear of change? So I'll let everybody think about that for a little bit, for a second here. So think about, bringing technology and trying to put new technology or different technology, or even adapting or broadening your current technology stack within your organization. What's your biggest barrier? All right, we have kind of a race here between budget and fear of using the wrong technology. We actually see this a lot on fear of choosing the wrong technology, because it is a big investment. And of course, we hear all the horror stories of technology and trying to put in programs and they fail. So what we're going to do now, hopefully, which will address a lot of those fears, is we're going to talk about the best practices, so that you don't have to be fearful of choosing the wrong technology and hopefully getting that budget. So again, if you understand those requirements and really working with somebody to say, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve, that can help you pick the right technology partner or partners, depending on the pains that you're having. But as we go into some of the best practices, I know that one is, around its communication and those stakeholders, right? Having the right people and representatives in the same room, and kind of having not only a governance, body around this on, what you're going to select, but even with changes, making changes, so that you're not starting out with something great and then everybody starts to put their own flavor to it, and it turns out to be kind of a cobbled mess. And that, of course, strengthens with communication and visibility. So I know, Will, that's one of the things on projects we've been involved with over the years on, having that governance model in place.
Absolutely, and the governance model starts essentially on day one. That when we talk about involvement of users all the way up to executives, is understanding how the system will be used, communicating the expectations, and just like with any other process within the company, having a very visible and accessible application and change process, right? So, in governance, we always want to make sure that we're driving towards good quality, but we're also, driving towards improvement, and we don't want to necessarily do things the same way, but just in a new tool. We actually want to take the time and do it right and make some changes, make some improvements. And we know that business is dynamic, and so things will change. And the system that you're using 5 years from now likely will not look the same as it does today because of regulatory requirements, technology changes, merger acquisition activities. There's lots of influences that drive it. But part of this governance process in the communication is having the visibility to anticipate what happens. So if we know, for instance, that that there are some changes that are coming from a regulatory perspective, we can anticipate what will be required at the facility level, know what the cost is, and be able to institute that change proactively and not worry that we're exposed in areas where we just don't know what's going on.
One of my favorites, again, it goes along kind of with that configuration customization. You're not a unicorn, right? We see it all the time. I see it where everybody's like, oh, but we're special. We're unique. We're like, are you? And if you are, why? Right? And so that comes down again to looking at those requirements and why you're so special. What is it that you're really trying to achieve, and having those conversations. And if you really kind of go through it, like, there are a lot of now industry best practices. Why are you so special that it's different than those industry best practices? Or even, we see this even between facilities when you're trying to roll out global elements where they're like, oh, no, but we're different. Well, yes, there's a common theme. So let's take incident management. There's a common theme of, structure of reporting incidents. And yes, there are some elements particular to specific countries based off of regulatory information. But if you take out, you really can look at, okay, 85% is standard. And then based off of geographical, differences for reporting and regulatory capabilities, then there's a difference. So don't think of it as it's completely different. You're not a unicorn. Look at that standard that you can bring across. What percentage of it is usually pretty high, and then you can do that configuration to meet those specific requirements based off of regulatory needs.
So let's talk about one of the best practices here at the top of the list, which is don't go too fast, but fast enough. That to me is one of the most important, having been, an implementer of these systems for many, many years, which is you don't want to rush into things, but you need to move fast enough that that you can fulfill a promise. Okay, so we get into some organizations sometimes where we get feedback that, hey, this initiative has been going on for 2.5 years, and we're just not sure that it's ever going to happen. Okay, and there you tend to lose some of the momentum that you had in the buy-in from that user community. And so, going down to that third bullet of invest in change management, your change management and your communication plans for how a system will roll out is absolutely critical. And it will, you kind of have one chance to get it right. And that's not to say that the system can't change over time. It absolutely can, and it should. It should grow as the business grows or as your requirements change. But it is critical to be able to hit a timeline of at least, initial meaningful technology rollout that you have. So that means not necessarily we're going to do it exactly the same way that we've been doing it in a spreadsheet, but we're doing it in a system. No, you can do things a little bit differently or a little bit more efficiently, but make sure that that's something that you can tackle in 3 to 4 months, or maybe 4 to 6 months for a larger organization, or that for a global organization that can maybe at a year you have all your facilities rolled out under, for instance, a safety incident management program where, each geographical area has a bit unique requirements there. So, understanding and that best practice is really, keep that momentum up, keep your promises to your workforce as far as how fast you can go. And many times that does involve the right business partner to get you there. That can be implementation consultants, that can be outside consultants, that can even be your industry colleagues that have been through that before, that can talk you through best practices and lessons learned and things that they've discovered, through, organizations and that network of people that have kind of been there, done that, is incredibly powerful to your success. Sam?
So let's talk about success, and I know we're coming up at the top of the hour. Let's get into a couple of those. So it is possible to succeed and to get everything right and to show the value within the organization. When a large government agency did a complete digital transformation of one of their programs, and what they saw was improved engagement with the employees. They had a carbon footprint reduction because they went completely digital. So think about all of the different forms and paperwork and things. They decreased their paper usage in the first 3 months by 60%. That's a huge cost savings to the organization. And they decommissioned 75 different applications and databases, which, of course, helps with the administrative burden, not only within your organization, but also IT as well. So you're making things better for your fellow colleagues. And of course, that improves security. We hear it all the time with technology. People are fearful of, sensitive data being transferred. Well, when you're going to one system instead of 75, among other things, that's going to improve your security. Global oil and gas, talking about that, you're not a unicorn. 3 different separate divisions globally across, they went to an 80% standard process on waste management, resulting in transport cost reductions because they have visibility so they can optimize transport. They decommissioned 84 applications and databases, again, improving the visibility and, of course, optimizing their carbon footprint because they're streamlining that transport. They're not having any necessary shipments going on. So lots of things that digital transformation can do for you. And I don't know if we left any time, Alan, for questions here.
I think we've run out of time, unfortunately. I just want to say thank you to you both for your excellent insights and expertise, and we want to remind everyone of the evaluation survey we're asking you to complete. The survey should be appearing on your screen now. Your input is important because it'll help us improve our future webcast. And if you don't see the evaluation survey on your screen, please turn off your pop-up blocker. You may also access the survey by clicking the survey button near the lower right part of your screen. And as I said, unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I'm sorry we didn't get to questions, but feel free to submit your questions because all of today's unanswered questions will be forwarded to our speakers. And once again, we hope you take the time to fill out our evaluation survey to give us your feedback. And that ends today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. I'd like to thank Pam Bobbitt, Will Reed, and everyone at Cority, and of course all of our listeners. Have a safe day.